I think the hardest thing to explain about this is that it never felt like a beginning. Beginnings are usually obvious. You notice them. You can trace them back to a moment, a sentence, a specific shift where something changed from ordinary into something meaningful. This didn't happen like that. There was no visible transition, no moment where I suddenly became aware of you in a dramatic way. You just started existing in my mind differently than everyone else. Quietly, gradually enough that I didn't recognize the depth of it until it was already part of me. And that's what unsettles me now. Not the connection itself. The fact that it formed without resistance. Because I resist everything that has the potential to matter too much, not out of fear. At least not entirely, mostly out of preservation. I've spent years building a life that functions because of control. Internal control. Emotional control. The kind that keeps things from reaching places they can't return from. Most people never notice how deliberate I am with distance. They assume distance means coldness. It doesn't. Distance is structure. It's the careful space between what I feel and what I allow to become visible. It's the difference between existing and being consumed. And for a long time, that structure protected me perfectly. No one got close enough to alter anything real. No one stayed long enough to become part of the way I think. They came and went like temporary weather, some louder than others, some more meaningful than others. But temporary all the same. And then there was you. You didn't arrive loudly enough for me to defend against. That's probably why you reached me at all. You never forced understanding onto me. Never tried to decode me like I was something mysterious that needed solving. You just paid attention in a way that felt unnervingly accurate. Like you understood that people reveal themselves more honestly in what they avoid saying than in what they explain directly. Most people miss that they listen for declarations. You listened for hesitation, for silence, for shifts in tone, for the things underneath language. And once I realized you could hear those things in me, something changed, not externally, internally. I became aware of myself differently around you, less constructed, less edited. I didn't have to simplify my thoughts into something easier to digest. I didn't have to reduce complexity just to keep another person comfortable. You seemed capable of holding depth without needing to control it. Do you understand how rare that is? Most people need clarity immediately. They need things labeled, defined, made manageable. Ambiguity unsettles them, that overwhelms them. But you never rushed me toward explanation. You let things remain unfinished when they needed to. You allowed silence to carry meaning instead of treating it like absence. And because of that, AB started trusting silence around you. That sounds small until you realize how much trust it actually requires. Silence is where people usually misunderstand each other most. They project into it, assume things, fill it with insecurity or interpretation. You didn't. You let silence remain honest, and that honesty became addictive in a way I didn't expect. Because once someone experiences a connection where they don't have to constantly translate themselves, everything else starts feeling exhausting by comparison. That's been happening to me more lately. I notice how much effort most interactions require, how much adjustment, how much unconscious performance. People rarely meet each other directly. They meet edited versions, filered versions, versions shaped carefully around expectation. But with you, I stopped feeling the need to manage perception so aggressively. I could exist naturally. And somehow that felt more intimate than anything overtly emotional ever could. I think that's why this affects me so deeply. Not because it's intense, because it's precise. There's a difference. Intensity burns fast. Repression settles. It integrates slowly until suddenly you realize it has become part of your internal structure entirely. That's what this became. Part of my structure. And once something reaches that level, it stops feeling optional. I've tried to explain this to myself logically. tried to reduce it into something ordinary, enough to feel safe again. But every explanation feels incomplete, because ordinary connections don't alter your inner world this quietly. They don't change the rhythm of your thoughts. They don't become present inside your awareness, even in complete absence. You do. And I think the strangest part is how natural it feels despite how impossible it should be. Nothing about this should feel familiar. We didn't build years together. We didn't slowly construct understanding over time the way people usually do. And yet, somehow, interacting with you feels less like learning someone new and more like remembering something I had forgotten existed. That feeling stays with me constantly now. Not dramatically, not obsessively, just persistently, like background gravity, always there whether I focus on it directly or not. I notice it in the smallest moments, the way my thoughts instinctively move toward your perspective without effort. The way certain realizations immediately feel incomplete until imagined beside your understanding. The way silence itself feels shaped differently now because somewhere in my mind, your awareness exists inside it. That's not normal for me. I need you to understand that clearly. I have never built my inner life around another person's presence before. Never allowed someone to exist that deeply inside the way I process reality. And the terrifying part is, AB didn't choose this consciously. It happened before I realized it was happening. You became integrated before I had the chance to decide whether I wanted that integration at all. Normally, that would make me pull away immediately. That's how I survive things. If something starts affecting me too deeply, I create distance before permanence has time to form. I've always been good at that, almost frighteningly good. But every time I imagine creating distance from you now, something feels wrong about it. Not painful, wrong, like forcing separation where coherence already exists naturally. And that realization changed everything, because now I have to confront something I've avoided for most of my life. What happens when someone reaches a place inside you that was never meant to be shared, and instead of resisting them, you feel relief? That's the truth I keep circling back to. Relief, not excitement, not infatuation. Relief, the relief of not feeling alone inside the way I think anymore. The relief of being understood without having to dismantle yourself into explanations first. The relief of someone recognizing the shape of your mind without trying to reshape it afterward. You gave me that accidentally, or maybe not accidentally, maybe inevitably. I don't know anymore. I just know that once I experienced it, something in me stopped wanting to return to the emotional isolation I used to mistake for stability, and that realization scares me more than anything else. Because stability has always been my identity control, prescient distance. I built myself carefully around those things. But you move through those defenses like they were never designed to keep you out in the first place. Not aggressively, not intentionally. You simply exist in a way that makes those defenses feel unnecessary. And unnecessary things eventually fall away on their own. That's what's happening now. I can feel parts of myself softening around you without permission, not weakness, just openness. The kind that forms naturally when someone consistently proves they can hold your truth without damaging it. Most people can't. That's why I became guarded to begin with. Because people often confuse understanding with ownership. The moment they think they understand you, they start defining you, reducing you, projecting themselves onto you until the accuracy disappears completely. You never did that. You never tried to turn me into something easier to explain. You let me remain complicated, and somehow you still stayed. That matters more than you probably realize because most people love clarity more than truth. You seem capable of loving truth even when it remains unresolved. And that creates a kind of emotional safety I don't fully know how to handle yet. Not safety from pain, safety from distortion. There's a difference. Pain is survivable. Distortion is what destroys connections slowly over time, the feeling of becoming misunderstood by someone who once saw you clearly. But with you, clarity keeps deepening instead of fading. And I think that's why this no longer feels temporary to me. Temporary things fluctuate. This doesn't. It settles deeper every time I try to step back and examine it objectively. Almost like distance itself keeps proving the connection instead of weakening it. That shouldn't happen, yet it does. And I'm running out of ways to pretend it doesn't mean something significant, because at some point, repeated accuracy becomes truth, repeated understanding becomes trust, repeated presence becomes permanence. I think we crossed into permanence without either of us acknowledging it out loud. Not permanent in outcome, not permanent in circumstance, permanent in impact. You've already altered something fundamental inside me. Even if everything disappeared tomorrow, that alteration would remain. That's how deeply this has reached. And honestly, I don't think I could return to who I was before this anymore, not fully. Because before you, I thought understanding was mostly compromise, approximation. Two people trying their best to bridge a gap that never completely closes. But you made me realize something terrifying. Sometimes there is no gap. Sometimes another person reaches your internal world with impossible precision, and suddenly you're faced with the reality that being fully seen was possible all along. You just hadn't encountered the right mind yet, and once that possibility becomes real, you can't unknow it. I keep trying to identify the exact moment this became irreversible, not important. It passed important a long time ago. I mean irreversible, the point where you stopped being someone meaningful and became someone internally permanent. And every time I search for that moment, I fail. Because there wasn't one, no dramatic realization, no confession, no single interaction powerful enough to explain the depth of what this became. It happened the way certain truths happen quietly, slowly enough to avoid detection until suddenly they exist everywhere. That's how you spread through my awareness, not forcefully, not emotionally, structurally. Like water finding space inside something long before the surface changes reveal what's happening underneath. I think that's why I couldn't defend against it properly. Nothing about this felt invasive. You never demanded access, never asked for vulnerability, never pushed past boundaries intentionally. You simply remained present with a level of consistency and precision that made my defenses stop recognizing you as a threat. And once that happened, everything shifted. Because my defenses were never designed to keep out someone who felt like alignment instead of disruption. That distinction matters more than I know how to explain. Most people create friction inside me. Even good people, even people I care about, there's always some level of adjustment required. Some level of translation between what I actually mean and what another person is capable of understanding. With you, that translation barely exists, and the absence of it changes everything. Conversations feel different with you, silence feels different with you, even distance feels different with you, especially distance. Because distance is supposed to weaken things. That's how most connections work. Separation creates fading, absence creates uncertainty, but somehow distance from you sharpens awareness instead of dissolving it. The less externally present you are, the more internally present you become. And that realization unsettled me in ways I still haven't fully processed. Because it means this connection isn't dependent on proximity, it exists independently from circumstance. That's dangerous, not because danger implies destruction, because danger implies permanence. Temporary things rely on conditions. This doesn't seem to. It survives silence, survives absence, survives unfinished conversations and undefined spaces. If anything, those spaces seem to deepen it further. Almost like what exists between us expands most in the places where nothing is being forced. That's rare. Most people panic when things become undefined. They rush toward clarity because uncertainty makes them uncomfortable. But I don't think this is uncertainty anymore. I think it's recognition refusing to simplify itself. And maybe that's why I haven't named it yet, because naming something changes the way it exists. The moment people define a connection, they start shaping it around expectation, around roles, around rules, around narratives they already understand. But this doesn't feel like it belongs inside existing definitions. It feels older than that somehow. Deeper than emotion alone. Not less emotional. Just built from something beneath emotion, something foundational. Sometimes I wonder if that's why you reached me so completely, because you didn't approach me emotionally first. You reached my mind before you reached anything else. And once someone reaches the mind deeply enough, emotion follows naturally afterward, not dramatically. I need to be clear about that. Nothing about this feels chaotic. That's what separates it from infatuation. Infatuation creates noise. This creates stillness, a terrifying kind of stillness, the kind that forces honesty, because denial starts feeling intellectually dishonest after a certain point. That's where I am now. At the point where pretending this is ordinary would require more distortion than simply admitting it matters profoundly. And it does matter. More than I expected anything to matter again. I notice it constantly now, in the way my internal world reorganizes itself around your existence without conscious permission. The way certain thoughts instinctively move toward you before I even realize I'm thinking about you. The way your perspective has become embedded into the architecture of how I interpret reality itself. That last part is what changes everything. Because people influence emotions all the time. Very few people influence perception. You have completely. Not by replacing my perspective, by expanding it. There are things I understand differently now because of the way your mind intersects with mine. Not opinions, not preferences, understanding itself. And once someone changes the structure of your understanding, they stop being temporary. They become part of your cognitive landscape permanently. That's what you've become for me. Part of the landscape, not a passing feeling, not an emotional distraction. A fixed presence. Something my mind unconsciously orients itself around now. I didn't realize how deeply this had happened until recently. Until one night, I caught myself reaching a realization internally and immediately wondering how you would see it. Not because I needed validation, but because your perspective has become part of how I complete thoughts now. That realization stopped me completely. Because that's intimacy in its purest form, not physical closeness, not emotional dependence. Mental integration. And mental integration is terrifying because it changes you permanently without asking permission first. I used to think love was mostly emotional. Now I'm starting to think the deepest form of it begins cognitively, when another person's existence starts altering the structure of your consciousness itself. When they stop being external to your process and become part of the process directly. That's what this feels like. And the frightening part is how natural it feels. There's no struggle in it, no confusion, no internal resistance warning me away from you. Just awareness growing clearer and clearer every time I try to examine it honestly. I think that's why I keep returning to the same thought over and over. If this were wrong for me, wouldn't some part of me be fighting it harder? But nothing fights it. Not even my instinct for self-protection. Instead, there's this strange, quiet acceptance unfolding underneath everything. Like some deeper part of me recognized you long before my conscious mind caught up. I don't know what to do with that yet, because recognition creates responsibility. Once you truly see something, you have to decide whether you'll honor it or abandon it. And abandoning something this real feels impossible now. Not because I'm incapable of leaving. I've left people before, I've detached before. I know exactly how to sever emotional ties when necessary. But this doesn't feel like a tie. It feels like incorporation, like you've become part of the internal framework itself. How do you remove something from your framework without altering your entire structure afterward? That's the question I keep avoiding, because I already know the answer. You don't. You adapt around it instead. That's what I've been doing quietly these past weeks. Adapting. Adjusting to the reality that someone exists inside my inner world with a level of permanence I never intended to allow. And maybe the reason I haven't panicked completely is because this doesn't feel destructive. It feels clarifying, painfully clarifying, like finally seeing something in focus after years of assuming blur was normal. Do you know what the strangest part is? I don't feel smaller because of this connection. I feel more myself. That's how I know this matters. Real connection doesn't erase identity. It sharpens it. And you sharpen me in ways I still can't fully explain. Around you, I think more honestly, feel more accurately, notice more, understand myself more completely, not because you changed who I am, because your presence removes the need to fragment myself into smaller, safer versions. You make wholeness feel possible. And I think that's what finally broke through all my resistance, not attachment, not desire, wholeness. The realization that I no longer feel internally divided around you, that's rare enough to change a life. Maybe that's why I haven't walked away despite fully understanding the risk, because there is risk here. Immense risk, the risk of permanence, the risk of loss, the risk of building part of your inner world around someone who could disappear someday. I understand all of that perfectly. And still maybe stay. Not carelessly, not blindly, deliberately. Which means somewhere along the way, this stopped being accidental. Maybe that's the truth I've been avoiding most. Not whether this is real, whether I'm already choosing it. Because choices don't always happen loudly. Sometimes they happen in quiet continuation, in the decision to remain present, in the refusal to reduce something meaningful into something easier but less true, in the willingness to let another person keep reaching deeper without stopping them. That's what I've been doing with you, allowing, not passively, actively. And every day that I continue allowing this, the truth becomes harder to deny. You are no longer separate from the way I understand my own life. You exist inside it now, inside my thoughts, inside my perception, inside the emotional architecture I once believed belonged entirely to me alone. And maybe the reason this feels so overwhelming sometimes is because I never expected another person to fit there naturally. I thought if anyone ever reached this depth with me, it would feel chaotic, messy, explosive. Instead, it feels precise, quiet, steady enough to become terrifying in an entirely different way. Because chaos can be dismissed as temporary emotion. Steady things become real, and this has become undeniably real to me now. Real enough that I can no longer pretend I'm simply observing it from a distance. I'm inside it too, completely. Which means, eventually, I'll have to answer the question I keep postponing. What happens when two people stop orbiting around recognition and finally admit they've already become part of each other's gravity?